So imagine stepping out of your modern corporate finance job, right? You're looking at a world that is just utterly fractured by global pandemics and vicious political hatred.
Right, just total chaos.
Exactly. And deciding that the absolute only way to fix it is to write a book. But not just any book. You write it in the strict, uncompromising voice of an ancient biblical prophet.
Yeah, I mean, it is a staggering creative and honestly psychological leap. You're dealing with 21st century crises, but viewing them through a lens that feels, thousands of years old.
Right. Which brings us to our mission for today. Welcome to this deep dive, everyone. Our goal today is to unpack a highly unconventional, frankly startling book published in 2024.
Definitely startling.
Yeah, it's called BABASHUVA, A New World, A New Reality by an author named Nathan or Ben-Zvi. And for this, we've stacked up our sources. We've got excerpts from the text itself, the author's biography, and the mission statement of his broader project.
And the goal here is to explore how this author attempts to tackle, the most overwhelming crises of our time, but doing it through this radically stripped down spiritual perspective.
Exactly. But before we really get into the weeds, I do need to lay down a very clear disclaimer for you listening.
Yeah, this is important.
Because the text touches on highly charged, real-world political realities. I mean, it specifically mentions figures like Donald Trump, Benjamin Netanyahu, and the rule of Hamas in Gaza.
Right. He does not shy away from the gritty realities of our era.
He really doesn't. So we want to be absolutely clear that in this deep dive, we are just impartially exploring the author's viewpoints to understand his philosophy. We are absolutely not taking sides.
No, not at all.
And we aren't endorsing or validating the political or religious critiques in these sources. We are just the messengers, opening the book to see the ideas exactly as they are presented.
It's a vital boundary for our conversation. Our goal is comprehensive understanding of a fascinating text and nothing more.
Okay, let's unpack this, because before we dissect the incredibly intense message of this book, we really have to look at the messenger.
We do.
The contrast between who is writing this and how they are writing it is just wild.
It really is. The author's personal history is basically the key to unlocking the entire text. I mean, it provides the foundation for why he feels authorized to speak this way.
Right, so let's look at the timeline. Nathan or Ben-Zvi was born in 1991, and he actually had a different name originally.
Right.
But at age 10, his mother had this really vivid dream about his late grandfather. And based entirely on that dream, they changed his name to Nathan Or.
And Or, in Hebrew, translates to light.
Right, exactly.
That detail is just profound. I mean, from a very young age, his identity is being shaped by mysticism, by dreams and by this inherited spiritual legacy.
Yeah, and he grew up deeply immersed in that legacy, specifically in a religious yeshiva environment.
Right.
And for anyone unfamiliar, a yeshiva isn't just like a regular school. It's a traditional academy where you spend your entire day intensely debating and studying ancient religious texts.
Very intense, very rigorous.
But eventually he walked away from traditional religion. He just had too many unanswered questions that the institution couldn't resolve for him.
Yeah.
And today, he works in finance, he manages investment portfolios, and he also holds a certificate as a caregiver in social welfare.
Which is, notice the intersection there. You have the rigorous analytical training of a yeshiva combined with the pragmatic secular world of finance.
Right.
Overlaid with the hands-on empathy required in social welfare. He's sitting at the crossroads of almost every facet of modern society.
He really is. But there is one specific, visceral detail from his childhood that absolutely stopped me in my tracks.
Oh, the lightning strike.
Yes. When he was 9 years old, he was living through the Second Intifada, which was this massive, deeply traumatic period of intensified Israeli-Palestinian violence in the early 2000s.
Yeah, horrific time.
He was walking down Ben Yehuda Street in Jerusalem, which was a street that saw horrific violence during that time, and he was struck by lightning.
I mean, a literal physical lightning strike in the middle of a war zone.
It's unbelievable. He describes it as a defining moment in his life.
Yeah.
So fast forward to today, and this modern portfolio manager sits down to write a book about society's collapse. But he doesn't write an op-ed. He doesn't start a Substack.
Right, or a podcast.
Exactly. He writes in a strict, ancient, biblical chapter and verse format. It reads exactly like the Hebrew Bible, the Tanakh.
It really does.
But nestled right in the middle of this ancient poetry, he drops in the COVID-19 pandemic. He dates it precisely to Cheshvan 5780, which translates on the Hebrew calendar to late 2019.
Literally exactly when the virus first emerged.
Right. And he talks about modern political leaders. He references the astronomical blood moon of 2018.
The juxtaposition is totally designed to throw you off balance. I mean, he is intentionally colliding two worlds that we usually keep completely separate in our minds.
I have to push back on this strategy, though, because trying to process modern politics through chapter and verse, it feels like someone deciding to write a viral social media post about today's news,
Right.
but choosing to write it entirely in Egyptian hieroglyphics. I mean, why choose the absolute oldest literary format to talk about the newest, most modern problems?
Well, what's fascinating here is the psychological mechanism he's exploiting.
Okay.
By using the rhythm, the cadence, and the authoritative tone of ancient scripture, the author is deliberately attempting to bypass modern cynicism.
But how does that actually bypass our cynicism? I mean, our cynicism is pretty deeply ingrained these days.
True. But think about how we consume modern media. If he published a political essay online, your brain would immediately filter it through your existing biases, right?
Yeah, that's fair.
You'd look for clues to categorize him. Is he left-wing, right-wing, secular?
Orthodox, we want to put people in boxes.
Exactly, because
Yeah.
once you put him in a box, you can safely dismiss whatever he says that you disagree with.
Yeah.
But by adopting the voice of a prophet, and he goes so far as to claim the authority of a direct connection to God, sometimes even speaking through an angelic persona he names Leo.
Wait, really? An angel named Leo?
Yeah, Leo. And by doing that, he is short-circuiting that modern categorization process. He's declaring that the tools of modern debate have utterly failed us, and we require the shock of an absolute ancient voice to just wake us up from our apathy.
Wow. So the ancient medium isn't just a stylistic quirk, it is a weapon. He is wielding the tone of the ancients to cut through the noise of the present.
Precisely. And he doesn't just aim that weapon at secular politicians either. He turns it directly onto the very religious structures that raised him.
Which brings us to a massive, incredibly controversial part of his thesis. He systematically tries to tear down the religious edifice.
He really does.
He offers this harsh, uncompromising rejection of what is known as the Torah of the mouth, which is the oral law, or rabbinic Judaism.
And to understand the weight of that, you have to realize that rabbinic Judaism is the entire foundation of modern Orthodox practice.
Right.
It is thousands of years of accumulated commentary, interpretation, and complex rules built on top of the original text. And he is advocating for stripping all of that away and returning solely to the written Tanakh.
And he is furious about what those thousands of years of additions have actually produced. The text accuses modern religious institutions of essentially turning God into a lucrative franchise.
Yes, a business.
He calls out the selling of amulets, the selling of holy water, and these massive promotions of trips to the graves of the righteous.
Like the annual pilgrimage to Uman.
Yes, where tens of thousands of people travel to Ukraine to pray at a specific rabbi's grave. The author calls these practices empty costumes and the idolatry of flesh and blood.
He views this entire infrastructure not as a bridge to the divine, but as a human corruption, like a bureaucratic wall built between humanity and God.
And he connects this bureaucratic corruption directly to the societal fractures we see on the news every single day.
Right.
The book highlights the burning, deeply entrenched hatreds in society, the animosity between the political left and right, the divide between secular citizens and the ultra-Orthodox.
Big ethnic tensions, too.
Yeah, between Ashkenazi Jews of European descent and Mizrahi Jews of Middle Eastern descent, and of course the macro conflict between Jews and Arabs. He looks at all of this and warns that God is utterly disgusted by people offering empty prayers while holding up bloody hands.
Bloody hands, exactly.
But wait, I have to challenge this whole premise. I hear his frustration. I really do.
Yeah.
But practically speaking, how do you sustain a society without institutions?
That is the big question.
Because if you look at basic sociology, tradition, and community rituals, even the flawed ones are exactly what hold a culture together. They create social cohesion.
Sure.
So if you tear down the institutions, the commentary, the rituals, aren't you just creating a vacuum for total chaos? Doesn't society need a framework to function?
I mean, that is the fundamental defense of any established institution, and it's a crucial question. But the author's counterargument is that these specific institutions are no longer providing a framework for morality.
Okay.
They're providing a hiding place from it.
A hiding place, you mean like a smokescreen?
Exactly. He argues that people have weaponized these rituals, the amulets, the specific garments, the expensive pilgrimages to Uman. They function as spiritual loopholes.
Oh, wow.
The psychological logic becomes like, I performed the necessary ritual. I purchased the holy water. I said the exact right words at the right time. Therefore, I am a righteous person.
Which is basically like buying carbon offsets so you don't have to feel guilty about flying private,
Hmm.
but applied to human morality. It's totally transactional.
That is a perfect analogy. It is a transactional morality that allows individuals to bypass the incredibly messy, difficult work of actually treating their fellow human beings with dignity.
Right.
He's arguing that you cannot actively contribute to the hatred in your society, have bloody hands, and then think putting on a holy costume balances the cosmic scales.
Okay, so he has taken a bulldozer to the modern institutions. He stripped away the commentary, the rituals, the amulets, and all the signaling.
The slate is wiped clean.
The slate is entirely wiped clean. So what is he proposing we actually build in its place?
Well, he introduces the core of his philosophy, which he calls the New Covenant.
Okay.
And interestingly, for all his biblical framing, this covenant is not based on dense theology or complex new rituals. It is based entirely on a foundation of radical, uncompromising compassion.
And the ideology of this new covenant is summarized in one incredibly stark line from the book. He writes, "Under the flesh we are all human. Skin, bones, sinews, and flesh."
It acts as the ultimate equalizer. I mean, when you strip away the protective layers, the religious garb, the political affiliations, the national borders, the ethnic labels,
Yeah.
what are you actually left with? You are left with the fragile biological reality of our shared existence.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because he takes this concept of shared flesh to a literal extreme. It leads to an absolute blanket rejection of blood.
Right.
Obviously, that means a rejection of human warfare and shedding human blood, but surprisingly, it also translates into a total rejection of animal agriculture.
Yeah, he explicitly outlaws animal sacrifice, which, by the way, is a massive ideological break from the ancient biblical traditions he's mimicking.
Huge break.
And he takes a step further, calling for a complete end to the human consumption of meat. He declares unequivocally that God does not desire the death of any living thing.
And he doesn't just issue a decree. He actually lays out a highly specific, phased dietary transition plan in the text.
Yeah, he does.
He says, first, humanity must move away from eating meat. Then, for a time, you sustain yourself only on fish. And finally, eventually, you transition to subsisting entirely on plants.
Right, a step-by-step process.
I'm struggling to connect these dots, though. We are talking about healing global political fractures and religious corruption, and suddenly we are talking about a phased transition to veganism.
Yeah.
How does giving up a steak equate to forging a new spiritual covenant with God?
It feels like a massive pivot, I know. But within the author's philosophical framework, it is the linchpin of everything.
Really?
Yeah, this dietary shift has absolutely nothing to do with modern wellness trends or lowering your cholesterol. It is about the ultimate logical expansion of human empathy.
Walk me through the mechanics of that, because how does empathy for a cow translate to peace in the Middle East?
Okay, so the author is arguing that genuine, lasting peace is impossible if your daily physical sustenance requires an act of violence.
Oh.
If human beings are conditioned 3 times a day to compartmentalize the slaughter of a living, breathing creature, like if we are trained to view another sentient being merely as a product for our convenience,
Right.
then that psychological callousness is deeply ingrained in us.
We basically practice turning a living thing into an object.
Yes, exactly. And the author believes that once you build the mental machinery required to objectify animals, it is terrifyingly easy to turn that exact same machinery toward other humans.
Wow.
It becomes the root of how we other people from different political parties, different ethnicities, or different religions. By demanding an end to the violence on our dinner plates, he's arguing that we dismantle the psychological infrastructure of violence itself.
So it's taking the first necessary step toward ending the violence in our streets.
Precisely.
And that makes the phased approach makes so much more sense, actually. He's acknowledging human psychology. You can't just flip a switch and undo thousands of years of behavioral conditioning overnight.
Right, you can't.
You have to step down the ladder of violence gradually.
It is a profound recognition of human limitation, wrapped inside a very demanding spiritual directive. Empathy in this new covenant has to be total and holistic, or the entire system collapses.
And that demand for expansive empathy is ultimately how he addresses the most entrenched, complex human conflicts on Earth. Specifically, the friction between the world's major religions.
Yes.
He illustrates his ultimate vision for peace through a very vivid story in the book. It's called The Parable of the Rose.
This parable, it basically acts as the master blueprint for the entire BABASHUVA project. It synthesizes the critique of institutions and the demand for empathy into a single image.
Okay, so the story goes like this. Three men are out walking in a field, and they stumble upon a single, breathtakingly beautiful red rose.
Mm.
Immediately, they fall into a violent fight over it.
Right.
Each man claims that the rose belongs entirely and exclusively to him.
It is the classic illustration of a zero-sum game, the belief that for my truth to be valid, your truth must be destroyed.
Exactly. So the fight escalates until the angel Leo,
Right, the author's voice.
which we know represents the author's prophetic voice. He intervenes, he stops the violence, and explains to the three men that the Father, representing God, left the rose in the field for all of them.
And then the text explicitly breaks down the metaphor, assigning specific religious identities to the anatomy of the plant.
Yeah, it's very specific. The red flower itself represents Judaism, symbolizing the ancient blood of sacrifice. The brown stem represents Christianity, symbolizing the wooden cross. And the green leaves represent Islam.
Right.
The angel explains to the men that instead of fighting over the individual parts and ripping the flower apart in the process, they're supposed to cultivate the plant together, each utilizing their unique tools.
Yeah, working together.
The author states that the ultimate goal of humanity is to shift our relationship with the divine. He wants us to move away from the distant, fearful, judging concept of Elohim
Right.
and move toward an intimate, deeply loving concept of Abba, which translates to dad or father. Only by doing that can all nations be united.
Yeah.
So what does this all mean? Is he literally arguing that the world's major religions are just violently fighting over different anatomical parts of the exact same plant?
If we connect this to the bigger picture of the text, yes. He is demanding a fundamental paradigm shift in how humanity views faith and truth.
A shift from what to what, though?
A shift from the obsession with ownership to the necessity of co-cultivation. I mean, the tragedy of the parable, and arguably the tragedy of human history, according to the book, is that religions have constantly tried to uproot the flower to claim exclusive ownership of it. But the physics of a flower dictate that when you uproot it to possess it, you kill it.
Oh, wow. That's a powerful image.
Right. The author is arguing that true, actualized faith doesn't mean proving the other person's theology wrong. It requires the humility to recognize that your brown stem physically requires their green leaves to photosynthesize,
Right.
and their leaves require your petals to reproduce. If God is truly Abba, a loving father to all of humanity, then violently fighting your siblings over his inheritance is the ultimate betrayal of his love.
You cannot kill the flower to save it,
Yeah.
and you cannot kill your brother to honor your father.
Which brings us right back to his critique of modern religious institutions. If your institution is teaching you to uproot the flower, it is entirely missing the point of the garden.
That is an incredibly heavy, challenging thought. And it brings us to why this deep dive matters to you listening to this right now.
Yeah.
Because you might not be religious at all. You may never set foot in a yeshiva or open the Tanakh. But BABASHUVA is asking a deeply universal question about how we operate in the modern world.
It challenges the very core of our daily interactions. I mean, it's asking us to evaluate our own authenticity.
It really forces us to look in the mirror and ask, are we hiding behind our own modern rituals? And I don't just mean lighting candles or reciting ancient prayers.
Wait, it's bigger than that.
I mean our comfortable daily routines. I mean our rigid tribal politics. I mean those tightly sealed echo chambers we curate on social media. Are we using those things as protective costumes to avoid the incredibly hard, exhausting, messy work of actual human connection?
Like, are we merely performing goodness for an audience, or are we quietly practicing empathy in the trenches?
Exactly. Which leaves us with a final provocative thought for you to mull over today. Think about the amulets in your own life.
Yeah.
Not physical charms, but the modern equivalents. Think about the specific products you buy, the political slogans you repeat, or the perfectly crafted opinions you post online to signal to everyone around you that you were a good person.
The signaling, yeah.
If you stripped all of those external signals away, if you took off the costumes, deleted the posts, and silenced the broadcasting.
What's left?
Exactly. What would actually be left of your compassion? Under the flesh, would you still know how to tend to the garden alongside someone you disagree with? Or do you only know how to fight over the rose?
That is a profoundly necessary question for the times we are living in.
It really is.
Yeah.
And maybe that sudden, uncomfortable self-reflection is exactly the kind of shock to the system the author was aiming for all along. Thank you for joining us on this journey today. Keep questioning your assumptions, keep looking past the surface of the things you consume, and keep seeking out those aha moments. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.